Tom came to UBRFC and was coached by a legendary coach that a lot of you guys won't know, by the name of Pete Johnson, PJ, bless him. And PJ hid Tom away in the first freshers group, freshers team, away from the coaches at the top of the club in the first team, which wasn't me back in Tom's time. Who was the head coach back then, Tom?
James Fondon.
Yes.
Was the coach. Yeah.
Heavily involved with student rugby as well in 7's now, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So, as the story goes that I know, Tom, do correct me if I'm wrong, that you were hidden away by PJ because you were pretty handy and showed potential. He kept you at fly half with the first years. You were slowly integrated into the UBRFC culture, and eventually you were released on the rest of the world. Year 2, year 3, was it?
Well, there's a different perspective on this story, but I think PJ would probably say that he was like fostering my talent or whatever he saw in me and protecting me from being damaged by being chucked into the first team. But no, it was great. I loved playing for the freshers. We used to rock up Thursday evening training with PJ. We used to play like an hour of football with a rugby ball down at Dingle.
Nice.
I mean, there was probably method in his madness. But yeah, I ended up at the end of that season, or sort of midway through the season, ended up playing a bit for the twos, and finally broke into the first towards the end of the season. I think then there was some question of PJ of what he'd been doing all year, but yeah, I think it was probably the best thing for me. In all honesty, it really was. We had a good freshers team that year as well.
It's nice to hear, and it does remind me I need to get in touch with PJ. The bloke's a legend. We need to check in on him. So again, just going back to Tom's background, he then went on to Oxford and spent a brief bit of time at some point with Quins, either before or after. I'm not sure where. Let Tom explain another time. And through into England 7's. Obviously, is better known for winning the silver medal at the 2016 Olympics. And is currently in camp, though been allowed a week at home, and has kindly given his time to UBRFC to come and join us this evening. So from here on out, I shall introduce Henry Bedson, Freddie Adam and Ben Stringer, who will pepper you with questions for the next 35 minutes. So guys, we've got until 1:45, at which point I'll jump in and say our thanks and goodbyes and everything. So all yours, Henry.
Perfect. Thanks, Goody. Hi, Tom. So name's Henry. I'm club captain this year. Just want to say a massive thank you to you for sort of taking the time to sit down with us.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's good to connect with the old club. It was some of my, kick off by saying some of my best rugby playing memories were playing for UBRFC. So it's nice to reminisce a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. I think probably, the best way to start off is, Goody's already done a good job, but I was just going to sort of kick off with asking you, if you could go into a little bit more detail on what you're doing at the moment. For those that don't know, I mean, we all know what you're doing, and then also just talk about sort of your journey and how you got there, and the transition from, university rugby and was 7's always the aim. If you could just give a brief summary of sort of where you are now and then how you got there.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to my third year of uni then, I guess, when I was at Bristol, because that's where the England 7's thing came about. I was playing the pre-season. I did pre-season before my third year with Bristol Rugby, and that was when they were in the champ before they went up. And obviously they've gone from strength to strength since then. But up to that point, I had no interest really from professional clubs or 7's. And then in the Easter holidays, just before my finals, I got invited to go and train with England 7's. And it came like super out of the blue. I'd just been kind of getting my head down, enjoying uni rugby, playing some representative stuff with England students, and then got a phone call to go and train with England 7's. So I went up and did a week's training in the Easter holidays, and they said, cool, come back in the summer once you've done your finals and do some more training. And that was kind of where it started. And the best thing about it was that it was very out of the blue. I was kind of, knuckling down, doing my best to knuckle down and think what job I was going to go and get when I graduated. As Joe said, I managed to secure a postgrad, so I delayed that job market for a year. For a moment, we're jumping into Matt's rave that he's having in his room. And then from there, I sort of was fortunate enough to, well, have had an amazing kind of career with England, and sort of fast forwarding really quickly to where we are now. It's been an interesting year for everyone full stop, but particularly in rugby and in sevens, we've had nothing. Things ground to a halt about this time last year. We were in Vancouver almost exactly a year ago, talking about what was this thing, coronavirus, like, is it that serious? And then we sort of flew back, and a couple of days later, we're going into lockdown. So now, fortunately, we've managed to get to a place where we've got a GB program, so Great Britain Sevens program, up and running, which is really the first time that it's happened. So it's kind of historic insofar as we've got a proper GB program this time. Whereas before Rio, it was very much a sort of extended trial. It was only 10 or 12 weeks we had before the games in 2016. So it was very much everyone arrives, play for a position, whereas this feels very much like a full program, a squad building as a group towards something, which is really exciting. I'm very fortunate to kind of be doing it. I mean, it's not without its challenges, but you know, and I know I've sort of given it in a few minutes there, but when I reflect on the fact that there was no givens for me when I was leaving uni about doing professional rugby, and the last year has reminded me that there certainly aren't any givens when it comes to professional sports. So yeah, I feel really fortunate to be in this position. And it's interesting when people talk about the transition from uni rugby to pro rugby. Like, obviously there are things that change, but there's also a lot that stays the same, or I think is valuable if it stays the same. Enjoying playing with your mates is something that is a constant, if you're lucky anyway. I think if professional rugby doesn't feel like that, then you're probably not in the right team or not in the right place. But yeah, so that was a very sort of jumbled version of how we got to where we are now. But I hope that was the job.
That was good. Thank you. I was just going to ask as well. I know Goody briefly mentioned something to do with Quins. What was the situation with that?
I don't know, Goody. You've made that one up, I think, or maybe someone's been fiddling the Wikipedia in advance.
I questioned that on Wikipedia because I went on there to actually check out your school background and whether you had actually gone into professional rugby, because it was going to be one of my questions later, was to find out if you had ambitions to go into the 15s game one day. And then I saw on Wikipedia actually that you'd actually touched base with Harlequins at some point, where it's listed on there.
Oh, interesting. No, I haven't. The only kind of sniff I've had of 15s was with Bristol when I was still at uni. And actually at the time that wasn't an amazing place to be when they just missed out on promotion. But and then after Rio actually was the time when I considered, you know, is this the time to go and play 15s and have a different challenge? And I was speaking to some clubs then, and I was really kind of weighing it up, thinking, do I stay with 7's? Do I go and give that a crack? And the ultimate decision came that 7's was too good a thing to leave. We had a really good squad, a really good group of guys who are some of my best mates still are. Everything obvious, good that comes with 7's, the travel. There were some new venues on the series that year. And all that stuff was enough to make me want to stay. And actually that turned out to be one of my most enjoyable years. And I was really glad that I didn't go. I think there's still a bit of me that's lingering, thinking, you know, how would I go in 15s and what would it look like? But that's mostly my ego wanting to go in and just kind of prove people wrong, because there's a lot of people that don't view 7's players as being as high performing as some of the Premiership guys and certainly the international guys, which I think is not necessarily the case. But actually after Tokyo this year, if all goes to plan and come back with a gold medal, after that, I'd like to go and play 15s somewhere. So probably see out my career playing 15s, I think, is the plan. Hopefully abroad, actually. If I can combine that, that would be ideal.
Somewhere in the south of France or something, eh?
That would be nice. The south of France would be nice. To be honest, looking at the States, I think, is one of the ones that would be quite cool to go and play in an up-and-coming league like the MLR. It's probably a bit more accessible as a league. Getting into teams in France is getting more and more difficult because you've got to be French registered. Or Japan was the other option we were looking at, but again, there are issues there because as a cap 7's player, you've got you count as a capped international in Japan, which means you're then competing against the likes of like Barrett and people like that who've got pretty good 15s pedigree.
Yeah. I've got to say to all the other lads as well, if you've got any questions, just drop me a message and then I'll hand over to you later.
They don't necessarily have to be as professional questions as Henry's asking me right now, lads, if you want. But
yeah, we'll get onto some fun later.
I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have tugged at that thread.
Stringer, do you want to kick off with your question?
Yeah, go on. Hi. Freddie and I have also got a couple of questions alongside Benson's and any that might get said to him. Going slightly away then from the super professional questions, but not straying too far into the fun that it was, Goody. Obviously, going on the World 7's circuit, you travel to loads of different countries, experience a lot of different cultures. What's sort of the most interesting or strange experience you've had whilst being out on the 7 series?
Yeah, I mean, it's a diverse mix of experiences for sure. I mean, some of the weirdest ones that just flashed into my head were in the early days in Vegas, because like rugby's quite big in the US now, but winding the clock back kind of 7 or 8 years, we're in the middle of Vegas as a rugby team, and no one had a clue what we were doing there. And like daily, we'd be getting guesses as to what team we were. I think we got gymnasts. That was one. Soccer was one that we got quite a lot. Swimming was another one. Never guessed that we were rugby players. But on the flip, like I said, it was a strange place to play, Vegas, because no one had a clue what we were doing. Even the people that came to watch didn't really know about the game. But it did make for a good night out afterwards, as you can probably imagine. I'm trying to think. So, I mean, do you know one of the best places that we all love going is Vancouver? I don't know if any of you guys have been over there, but an amazing city, amazing place. And they, on the flip side, really buy into the rugby. They love it. They're a brilliant crowd to play in front of. And I think those are the kind of things that stick with you as a player, is that feeling that you get from the crowd. And we're actually really fortunate that, especially in recent years, the crowds we've got to play in front of have been, good size, like engaged. Admittedly, they're usually sinking a fair few pints as the day goes on. But if that means they're louder, then everyone wins.
Brilliant. I'll do one more before I pass over to Freddie. Obviously the Fijians are famous more so for the 7's and their 15s, and you watch them. I went to the London 7's circuit about 2 years ago, and I just saw a try where Fiji bloke was looking the wrong way. It wasn't even out the back; he just chucked it straight over his head like that, and you sort of sat there in awe. And I was wondering, sort of, is that a whole different beast playing against the Fijians, and how do you sort of prepare for it? Because what I've seen or read or heard is that their sort of tactics are to make sure there aren't any tactics and create as much chaos as possible, because they're the best in the world, is it? So I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because they are a unique challenge, because no one plays like them. And as a result, you can't really train against them in training, because it's difficult to replicate that. I mean, we do that sometimes. So we're like, right, Team A is going to play as Fiji and Team B is going to play as England or Great Britain. But a group of England players trying to play like Fiji, it is not the same, because we haven't grown up playing the style of rugby they do. And it is incredibly difficult to defend, because it is so unpredictable. It's a great kind of concept for rugby, without getting too much into the nitty-gritty of like the coaching of rugby. But if you can, if you're not giving defenses pictures that they've seen all the time, and they can't make reads, it's very hard to defend. And that's what Fiji do all the time. I've been mugged off so many times playing Fiji and made it look very silly, either by like little Jerry Two-Eye stepping me in a phone box, or that's it, the guy's like going to ground and you think, oh, I'm going to go in for the steal, and they've offloaded the ball and you're still looking for the ball, trying to steal it, and the guy's running under the stick scoring a try. There's a clip of me doing exactly that in Hong Kong. PO2I, a guy who used to play for them, big guy, and he just throws it round his back, and I'm there still going for the jackal, and the ball's long gone. But that's the beauty. I mean, I actually love playing them, and I think in recent years actually we really kind of got close to mastering how to shut them down. Essentially, you'd have one defender on the ball carrier, and you just have to trust that guy was going to make the tackle, and then everyone else around them, all the other defenders, their jobs were have half an eye on the ball carrier, but really you're watching where the support players are coming from, because you know they're going to try and throw the offload. So if you can, rather than trying to track the ball, you track the man. So it's almost like a game of bulldog, because if my mate next to me is going to tackle the ball carrier, I'm just looking for the first support man, and I'm going to track him wherever he goes, because that's where the offload's going to come. And you try and shut it down that way and almost force them into a ruck-based game, which is not what they want to do. It's easier said than done, but I think that's probably the way to shut them down. But they are such a good team to have on the series, because they provide so much entertainment, and everyone, all players from all teams, love the fact that they do what they do, because it just adds so much to the whole thing.
Thanks very much. Some really interesting stuff. I'll pass over to Freddie now. He's got a few questions.
Nice one. Cheers, Ben.
Hi, Tom. Thanks very much for chatting to us. We have actually met before. We chatted for about 5-10 minutes on the tube to Wembley for Chelsea Spurs FA Cup semi-final a few years ago. I doubt you remember.
That rings a bell. It rings a bell.
I think my mates eventually dragged me away for pestering you.
That's a niche moment, but I'm glad that you brought it up.
Well, I remember it because you were going to support Spurs. It was very irritating.
I'm thinking about giving that up. It's not a nice place to be at the moment. Anyway,
we've got a few more for you. Just a little bit more about your time at Bristol. You said, how fondly you remembered your time at the club, and some of your best memories are from when you were at UBRFC. Could you tell us a little bit more about what some of those favourite memories are, either on or off the pitch?
Yeah, I was having to think about this earlier. I mean, there's definitely lots that I probably can't remember from kind of Wednesday nights and things like that, but you don't remember the details, but that was a really good time. And there were some, I've gone straight in for the booze stories, but there were some amazing bus trips back from places. And it's actually, that was one of the benefits of being in the freshest team in my first year, was that some of the bus trips were excellent. But genuinely, and I'm not just saying this to sound cheesy, but honestly, some of the best times were just going to training of an evening and kind of jumping in the car with a load of the lads and going down to Dingle and spending an evening kind of throwing yourself around in the mud and just kind of chatting shit with each other. Those are, and I didn't realize it at the time, but those are such special moments. Those are the times that you kind of really forge great relationships with people, long-lasting friendships. And it's very sad, but the guys I was doing that with, now we're going to weddings and whatever grown-up things we now do, but we still talk about the kind of stupid stuff we used to get up to at the club, or games, or games we wish we'd won as well. It still hurts that we lost to Durham in the semi-final of the Bucks that year, which we can't go into now because I'll get upset. But it was great because it did mean a lot to us as well. I think that we had an amazing buy-in back then, which was, it was a pretty special thing to be a part of, but probably only truly realised it on reflection. But hopefully you lads are starting to, I don't know what years you guys are all in, but you're starting to experience that and are making the most of it. Because it's not something you can easily replicate. I think there's something about the fact that people kind of give up their time to do it, and kind of are willing to put time into it outside of all the other stuff that you could be doing at uni. So I think that's what makes it a pretty cool place to be. I'm trying to think of some specific examples. We had some great games when we beat Uwick down at our place. We beat Loughborough down at our place at Dingle, which was great. And now I'm only thinking about booze stories, which that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think we'll leave that one so that Goody doesn't have to stop the recording. So you said earlier about how you made it from university into 7's setup. How did you find it from university rugby 15s, where you're spending every Wednesday night not remembering it, to playing international 7's, which is all about fitness? And what were how did you find the transition?
Yeah, I talk up the social side. I was pretty pretty average on the beers, to be honest. But I did, what I've left out is I did work hard at my training, at rugby. Like, I think the fact that you had both at uni was so rewarding. Everyone had a great time, but actually people worked pretty hard as well, and people would be going to the gym, you'd be doing the fitness, everyone would max themselves out at training, at the games on Wednesday. And so I was kind of probably better prepared for it than you might think in some ways. Like, I wasn't in bad shape. Although I very nearly threw up in my very first England 7's session. But I think that was because, in true student fashion, I'd rocked up, and I think it must have been Monday lunchtime we met, and it was free lunch. So I've rocked up at the Lensbury Hotel where the England 7's base was, and it's free lunch. So as a student, I thought, well, it'd be rude not to make the most of this. So I've not taken the piss, but I've made the most of it, as you do. And not really thinking that we're training in an hour or something. And obviously all the other boys know just to have a little bit. And then about half an hour into training, I could just feel this lunch just churning around in my stomach. And I managed to keep it down, because I don't think that would have been a good look for my first session, to have held that up all over the pitch. But yeah, I found it all right from the fitness side of things. I think I've been fortunate. I've always had a decent engine, so I've kind of lended it. It's kind of helped for 7's, and I was always relatively quick. So again, was able to transfer that. The biggest challenge I had was probably like the durability side of things. Like, 7's is such a demanding sport, and you really have to kind of look after yourself, which is not always something we do as student rugby players, student athletes. And I think that's something that I did have to tweak a little bit in my third year when rugby was a bit more serious. And it's something I've certainly had to try and master since I've been a professional.
Excellent, thank you. Milo, do you want to come off mute, ask that question you sent us?
Yeah, I just asked about Rugby X. I'm not 100% sure if you took part in it or not, but it was just amazing to watch, and I wondered what was your thoughts on it, and if you know if it's going to keep going, and how it kind of how different it was from 7's.
Yeah, that's a good one to talk about. I was injured, or coming back from injury at the time, so I didn't play, but I was there and I was commentating on it, which was really fun, because it meant I just got to watch all the games and kind of be absorbed by it. And it was really entertaining. I know what you mean. It was like a really entertaining spectacle. Some of the boys didn't enjoy playing it that much. I think the lack of space made life pretty difficult. But I think if the teams, it is going to continue, to answer that question. They've booked out, I think they've booked out the O2 again for maybe not this year, but next year. Obviously indoor events are not necessarily on the cards at the moment, but they've booked out venues in New Zealand, Australia to run it as well. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out for the future. It's going to become part of the rugby calendar, I think. And it's probably going to be something that you potentially get 7's players crossing over to do. So do the 7's season and then maybe go and do whatever it is, however many tournaments doing Rugby X. And I think they'll probably try and make it a bit of a money spinner for players as well, kind of like IPL style. Like, so the players can earn extra money, which I think will lure across a lot of 7's players, because 7's players aren't paid as much as 15's guys, and particularly in countries like Fiji, Samoa, Kenya, where they're not well paid. That'd be a good opportunity for players. But yeah, I think there's legs in it. I think it's exciting. I think it'll get better when teams kind of master it a bit more. But the production behind it, and I don't know how all you guys feel about where rugby's going, but the emphasis on the production side of it, the show that they want to put on, is definitely going to be a factor of the game moving forward, because they need to find ways of bringing people into the game that aren't 50, 60 years old, people that go to the Six Nations at Twickenham. Like, we need to bring in a younger crowd, and I think making it a different spectacle is one of the ways to do that.
I've got another question, if that's all right. After the Olympics, is the GB team going to stay together because it's all new and different now, or is it going to go back to the 4 different countries, or do you not know?
Now, this is a probing question. I think they've announced that the GB squad is going to go onto so they've announced World Series dates for like October, November. And I'm not really sure what next season looks like as a World Series as a whole, but there are World Series tournaments later on this year, and they're going to feature GB rather than England, Scotland, Wales. And then whether it carries on beyond that, I don't know. A lot of it comes down to, in all honesty, who wants to put the money in for it, and where that money comes from often dictates what team will be out there. If the separate unions decide they really want to fund it, then it might go back to that. But there's a reluctance to put any money down at the moment anywhere. So.
Cheers, Milo. Switching up a bit, Tom. I was going to ask before I go to Matt Dale in a moment, but who was or who is like your favourite person, whether they're in the GB7 squad or not, to sort of go and have a beer with, or a beer or two?
That's a good question. I better pick a couple of guys from the squad, I suppose. Well, I don't know how many of you guys know Alex Davis, but if you don't follow, he's actually a great guy to follow on Instagram and stuff. An amazing story of his kind of career of a lot of downs, but some ups, and he's an amazing player. And I lived with him he lived with me and my wife for a bit. He was a bit like you, me, and Dupree, but we're really close, and he's always good for a beer. And actually, funnily enough, me, him, and Charlie Hayter, who's now the head of the GB program, so he's like the sort of director of rugby type role. He's actually one of my best mates as well. So there's an interesting dynamic there. But those would be two guys. Someone not to go for a beer with, Dan Norton, probably, because he just escalates things too quickly. He'll do something stupid, and you'll end up having to protect him from someone smacking him or something like that. Or smacking him yourself. That's normally the way it goes.
And then actually, I've just got another one quickly, and then I'll go to Max. Sorry, mate. I was just going to ask, obviously, you're GB7's captain, you've been England 7's captain, sort of what for you makes a good captain, and did like anything rugby at uni or just sort of parts of your career prepare you for sort of a leadership role?
Yeah, good question. I think so. Interestingly, I didn't captain the side throughout university. I didn't even in my last year of school. So when I was asked to captain England 7's, that was, I hadn't really led any team since my kind of younger days at school. And the biggest lesson was probably to find my own way of doing it. I think it's really useful to pick out lessons from other people, but as soon as you start trying to emulate someone else too closely, it can be a pretty dangerous road to go down. I think you just have to understand how to apply who you are as a person, and particularly the values, the things you think are important, and apply those to the leadership situation in the best way you can. And the other thing was just not worrying about making mistakes as a leader. I think it's easy to put pressure on yourself as a leader, as a captain, that you have to have all the answers, that you have to get everything right. And actually, it's almost the opposite. If you can role model, being prepared to make mistakes and role model behaviors like that, then it counts for a lot. I could go on for a long time about that, but I'm conscious that we'll get through some less heavy questions.
Yeah, we'll go Mac Dale then. It's about time.
Cheers, thanks, Burton. So there, I've got two. One's as a 7's player, like how much you take from the crowd, and if you were sort of, as the Premiership boys are doing at the moment, playing empty stadiums, how do you think that would affect your love for the game or something, or your ability to sort of express yourself without a crowd to feed off? And then a more nosy question: what's the sort of the one quality you probably would look at a player and go, they're going to be a good player, or they're going to have success in 7's?
So the first one about the crowds, I've always just enjoyed playing. I think when obviously I came into the professional game relatively late compared to some players. I think I was 21, 22 when I actually got my first cap for England 7. So I was fully used to playing amateur level, playing in front of no crowds and still having a love for the game. So I don't think I'd have a problem with that. But well, I say that I wouldn't have done previously, but now I've had a taste of, you know, the buzz that you get from playing in front of big crowds. I mean, running out on a Friday night in Hong Kong, for example, which is over 40 years old as a tournament, huge, you know, world famous tournament. You run out on the Friday night, basically a stadium packed full of England fans, under the floodlights, and the buzz you get from that is honestly addictive. It's like, and having not played for a long time, when I think about those things, I really feel the urge to kind of satisfy that, and it's very difficult to replicate that kind of buzz you get from that experience. So I don't think it would affect my play, but I'd certainly missed it. And your second question about qualities you look for in a player, I guess I have a certain bias towards certain things. Like it's an old school one, but players that are willing to work hard, and not just work hard in the obvious ways, but kind of work hard off the ball and things like that. I think that's something that you can never really take for granted, especially in a game like Sevens. I think it says a lot about your mindset. And then I always have a tendency to look at the way players attack more so than the way they defend. It's just a bit of the game that I prefer. So I look at players that are comfortable on the ball is one thing. So it's difficult to put your finger on exactly what that is, but, you know, certain players look more comfortable on the ball than others. And the other one is the players that are good at scanning space, players that actually move their direction, their vision a lot, taking a lot of information. It's a skill that you can learn. It's not something that you kind of have or you don't. But I think those are probably two ingredients that make for a decent player, and kind of demonstrate some good foundations to build on anyway. There's an interesting thing as well about, particularly in Sevens, when we are looking at bringing new players in, and I don't have a part in that process, but I know that when the coaches were bringing in guys into the academy or into the squad, you really have to kind of do due diligence on what kind of person they are. So find out from ex-coaches, ex-teammates, what type of person they are, because particularly in Sevens, when you're traveling, you're living with each other, you're on flights together, you spend a lot of time with the boys. And if you're not someone who's going to be considerate of others, if you're not going to pull your weight in the team, you're not going to kind of gel with the other players, then there's actually it doesn't matter how good you are at rugby, it's going to drag the whole thing down. So that's something that I think is not to be undervalued as well. Good question.
We'll go to Hugh Morris then.
Thank you, Bedson. Hi, Tom. I was just going to ask about the travel side of things. How is life sort of in Olympic villages, and how is it when you're, I presume, together with all the other players from the other nations when you're on World Series tours?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that's, in terms of the World Series, it's unique to Sevens that we get to mix so much with opposition, because normally in 15s, obviously, they'll see each other after the game and they might have a beer, but they're not really spending a lot of time together. Whereas in World Series tournaments, all the teams stay in the same hotel. That's a prerequisite for the tournaments. So we're having meals in the same kind of big conference halls and whatever, or the same restaurants. So you do mix, and it's one of the real things that I valued, or certainly realised I've missed in the last year, is not having those connections with the guys from other teams. It's such a joy to be exposed to people with different cultures, people who see the world a different way. You've got at least sort of 10 different languages going around in the food hall and stuff like that, and that's really cool. It's weird because when I was younger and first on the World Series, you're always thinking you need to have an edge on everyone else, and there was a sense at which, in the England team at that time anyway, you didn't want to be seen to be too friendly to some of the other teams, which I think on reflection was a waste of time and waste of energy. I think, kind of make as many friends as you can on that, because it's a very unique and special environment. And then the Olympic Village was that kind of on steroids. Actually, that's an inappropriate metaphor to use, but it was it was that just kind of times a million. It was unreal, the mix of cultures, the number of different countries, but also because you got all the different sports, and this is the benefit of multi-sport events like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games. You've got like little tiny gymnasts next to kind of 6'8" basketball players, or huge like discus throwers walking next to skinny cyclists, and they're all in this one place, and it is just kind of you actually become, you're probably quite rude. Like you're walking around just like looking at people and sizing people up. And it's not, you know, not to be nosy, but it's just an amazing collection of the human species, like all concentrated in one place. And I think on top of that, you've got the fact that everyone knows they're there for what is likely to be the highlight of their career, probably one shot, or, you know, once or twice in a lifetime chance of being at Olympic Games. So there's this sort of tangible excitement that just permeates throughout the village. And it's a buzz and an energy which I've never really felt anywhere else. And it was really cool. And I think being in Team GB, we're really lucky, especially in Rio, because we had our own tower block for one. So it felt like we were kind of had real ownership over that space. But there are also some big names in that Team GB team. So you like going in the lift with Mo Farah and like chatting to Andy Murray in the laundry queue and stuff. And it's just kind of like pinch yourself moments, because seeing those guys on TV and realizing you're wearing the same kit and kind of there to do the same job and you have the same goal as those people is pretty cool. And it just makes you think bigger than your sport. I think even in sevens, which is a truly global sport, it feels very small when you then put it into the Olympic context and kind of broaden it out.
All right, great stuff then. I reckon that's probably a good time to bring things to an end. We've got 3 minutes left. So, I mean, on behalf of myself and then on behalf of the boys, really, a massive thank you to you, Tom. Hopefully, maybe we'll see you in September at our alumni dinner at Twickenham. Who knows?
Do you know what? I've never been to one of the alumni dinners. I've never been able to make it for whatever reason. So I am due, and I haven't got any rugby scheduled for September at this point. So yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
24th of September. We've just moved the date today, so pencil it in, mate. We'd love to have you join us.
Yeah, that would be good fun. That would be good fun. More reminiscing.
Absolutely.
Be great.
Again, just to echo what Henry just said, thank you ever so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Short and sweet. Hopefully when we meet you at Twickenham, we can hear more stories from the Olympic Village. All the stuff we can't talk about on here, potentially stories in Bristol, because there's definitely some good ones. I can tell by that smile. And yeah, we'd love to have you down for a game potentially at some point as well, back in Bristol. And we wish you all the very best with your training and preparations for the Olympics. You go with our love and support, mate. So best of luck with it all.
Thanks. Really good to chat, guys. Great questions. What's the situation at the moment for you guys? What's the plan? What's on the cards in terms of rugby?
Grassroots is allowed to return around the 29th of March. These guys will have an invite coming out soon to get back into rugby somewhere around the 9th, 10th, 11th of April. And then obviously they've got the balancing act of deadlines and exams through term 3, but there'll be a fair few of them involved in potentially fixtures in early June. We've got invites from other universities to play some games. Certainly those who are with us next year will be into a pre-season, a mini pre-season in preparation for getting them fit and ready to get their off-season squared away when they're, June to August, and then back with us August the 16th, hopefully, for a proper pre-season as we roll into the Bucks competition once again. Nice. Boys in good shape? It'll be a nice challenge this year. We're losing about 90% of the first team. So there's a lot of guys who are going to be, a few will be in shock and a few are going to step up as leaders. So it'll be a brilliant challenge for the coaching team and an even bigger challenge for these guys to make that side of it. But more importantly, from the rest of the club as well. I mean, because of COVID, we had to turn away 120 freshers from joining the club because we were limited by the membership numbers. And hopefully we're going to welcome all of those guys in, plus another intake of freshers as well. So, we could have the biggest numbers in the club's history potentially next year, with a lot of motivated young guys to get stuck in on the rugby pitch. So, yeah, fingers crossed it all goes well. Yeah, well, good luck with the guys. I can't imagine it's been an easy year, like, both in terms of rugby and sport, but also in terms of all the other stuff. And maybe not the year you had planned, but hopefully you've all managed to make the most of it anyway and continue to do so. So keep enjoying yourselves and, yeah, making the most of it, I think. Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Tom. Take care. Cheers, boys. Cheers. Nice one. Take it easy.
Thanks very much, Tom. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.